Welcome Exiles to Archmage Elementalist. This build has been made on a budget, restricting itself to a 5-link with a couple of clips at the start showcasing a 6-link pledge for reference in case you wanted to do that level of investment. Now, the build is only a fairly basic set of gear to demonstrate how strong Archmage can be. I needed something I could make relatively cheap after losing a lot of my currency on the last few builds, and I settled on Archmage because of my confidence in its power, and Archmage surely is powerful. The build boasts some strong DPS numbers while maintaining fantastic layers of defense. For defense, we have 40% mind over matter effect, 70% attack dodge, 60% spell dodge, wind dancer, a thick arcane cloak if you know what I mean, 40% chills, and somewhere around 5k mana regen per second. Not to mention the granite flask, the spell block, the evade flask. We're rocking some defense, that's for sure. Now, another benefit of this build is it's extremely resistant to map mods, only being hard countered by no regen maps specifically, while being able to do all other map mods quite well. Normally I like to stick to uncharted off-meta territory, but I'm glad I revisited Archmage for a breath of the easy life. Building around an overpowered mechanic really is a relaxing vacation from the difficulty of trying to make an underpowered skill take down the endgame. And that's the great thing about builds like Archmage. The build simply cruised through all the content from the moment I equipped my early mana-based uniques, and it never stopped cruising all the way through to an 80% the feared on a 5-link. So to all my party people who like to keep it off meta and play PoE on the hard difficulty mode, I'm simply offering this build as a nice little vacation option if you want an easy win to boost morale from the past build failures that may or may not have occurred for you. Because trust me, I was just there, and it feels good to get a win even though it may be a somewhat shallow victory. Speaking of overpowered mechanics, real quickly, I want to address why we are playing Ball Lightning over all the other spell choices out there, and also why it's one of the best spells in the game in my opinion. Ball Lightning in the game doesn't communicate its strength very well. Just reading the gem description wouldn't lead you to believe it's an overpowered spell, but underneath the hood of Ball Lightning, the skill offers the highest damage effectiveness of basically all the spell choices available. The gem reads that it has only 50% effectiveness of added damage, but it fails to mention that the ball hits enemies every 150 milliseconds, and with a slower prod support and a bit of AoE investment via Elementalist and a few nodes on the tree, we cause each Ball Lightning cast to hit enemies up to 13 times. Running the quick math of 13 hits puts it at 650% effectiveness of added damage. To put that into perspective, one of the spells that is supposed to hit the hardest, Discharge, only hits for 450% effectiveness of added damage. This pairs perfectly with Archmage given the support provides such high amounts of flat added damage. Now that we've outlined a good overview of the build, we're going to proceed in-game to break down the build's gear, the passives, the works. I'll see you there. Welcome to the in-game portion of this guide. Now to start off with, let's look at the gear. I'm going to try to keep it short, keep it quick. We have a lot of uniques here. This is done for two reasons. One is mana uniques are actually really good and often they're very hard to beat with rares. And two is it keeps it cheap and it keeps it simple so you have a good idea of what items to go for. To start off with, we have some big mana uniques like Edziri's Foible, Cloak of Defiance. They give us a bunch of mana regen, mind over matter, a bunch of flat mana, percent mana, great things there. Crown of the Inward Eye does something similar, gives us a bunch of life, bunch of mana, and then it also gives us Transfiguration of Mind. If you don't know what this does, it gives us percent damage based on the percent mana we have in our build, which we have a lot of, so it gives us a lot of damage. It's a very solid helmet. Now, you wouldn't use this if you're going Hierophant, but for Elementalist, it's fantastic. Another thing I want to say here is the Ball Lightning enchant is not necessary. It does not increase our single target, and really, it doesn't improve our clear. I would not recommend it. Do not spend extra for this enchant. Just get a decent roll and be happy with it. Or if you want to spend money, go for Ball Lightning damage or Ball Lightning AoE. I think would be better than an additional projectile is here. After that, our rings, we get Dream Fragments for chill and freeze immunity and some more mana and mana regenerate. Our other ring we use is Call of the Brotherhood. Normally you'd use something like a Essence Worm to get a free aura like Wrath in the build, or Zealotry in the build, but I opted for Call the Brotherhood because I thought that Trinity's support is better than doing an aura like Wrath or Zealotry, and it also gives us mana regen rate, some lightning damage, and some resistances. You want to make sure you have a ring that has the turbulent quality on it, so that way you get almost 50-50 conversion, and you can easily proc Trinity with Ball Lightning. So that's what we're doing there. For our boot slot, we went with Omiyekans. I would recommend just enchanting these in the Uber Lab yourself. That's what I did. And I think it's like a 1 in 15 or something like that to get the correct enchant. So I would just run a couple Gift of the Goddesses, or just run some regular labs with some twice enchanted. You'll make some money on the way from enchanting helmets with good enchants. You'll hit mana regen rate, and when you do, you can throw it on your Omiekans. Now, before you get the mana regen enchant on these boots, I would recommend just using some Dance of the Offered boots. They will give you basically all the same stuff minus the dodge for the attack and spell, so you'll be a little bit less defensive until you make this upgrade. After that, for our staff, we went with Pledge of Hands. This is because it gives us supported by level 30 Greater Spell Echo. Why is Greater Spell Echo important? It adds 2 additional repeats to your cast. This means your character will cast 4 times, and you'll only spend mana once. It basically means your spell costs more, but you lose less mana per second casting it. The other downside of this thing, or the only downside of it, is you are locked in place while you're casting. So we layered a lot of defensive layers, so it's not too big of a deal. We can still run ultimatums perfectly fine. I did 3 Trial Masters on this guy because he finally spawned for me. I don't know if it's like a character seed or what, because I haven't seen Trial Master all league. Randomly, this guy could just continually get it. I don't know what was going on, but it does ultimatums fine. It just cleans him out real easily. After that, it also has some mana and some spell damage. A great option here. Really just pick one up for 40, 60 C or whatever. Buy yourselves a Jeweler's Touch Prophecy to get a 5-link. That's what you're going to do for the Cloak of Defiance, and this here to get your 5 links. Now, after your Pledge of Hands, we're looking at our belt and our glove slot. What I would recommend is this here and this here. These are 2 items that have 2 things in common. They both get mana and life, and then you also get double resistances with an open suffix. So this way you can cap your resistances that you don't have capped from your other gear pieces, all not having resistances on them, except for maybe Omiekan has a little bit of lightning res. You get a little bit of cold res here, a little bit of cold lightning here. You're going to need a lot of fire, and you're going to need a lot of lightning and a lot of cold res coming from these 2 item slots. That's what I'd recommend. I eventually upgraded to this here, which is a Redeemer belt with mana recovery rate. This is a pretty nice upgrade. It will take you somewhere between, say you have 4,500 mana regen per second, you'll end up being closer to like 5,400, 5,300 mana regen per second once you get a belt like this. It's a pretty nice upgrade. It's not necessary though. I believe I could easily do the Feared on this belt as well. This just makes your sustain a little bit better, a little bit nicer, and this is something you'll look forward to doing once you get a little bit more currency to craft with some Lucent fossils on a Redeemer belt base. Hopefully that explains the gear pretty well. Now let's look at the gem links. Now for starters with the gem links, for our ball lightning support, I'd recommend Anomalous Ball Lightning for cast speed. I'd recommend Anomalous Spell Echo for cast speed. I'd recommend Anomalous Trinity support for cast speed. The reason for this is, if you don't have good cast speed, this lockdown feels a lot worse and worse. So I like going for cast speed for a lot of our alternate qualities here, because it makes the amount of time we're locked down casting a lot less due to that cast speed, and it's a nice DPS boost as well. So these alt qualities aren't too expensive. From my experience, I think it was like 20C, 30C, and like, I think this was like 120, 130C. The Anomalous Trinity was probably the most expensive out of the group, but that's still, I think, worth it for the additional cast speed you get from them. I think those are nice upgrades to get. After that, slower proj, nothing to say about that, that's fine. And just a regular Archmage support is great here too. Originally, I was using alt quality Archmage support, so that way I wouldn't need a Call of the Brotherhood to get Trinity procced, but unfortunately, once I got Arcane Cloak leveled up high enough and I started getting enough mana, it ended up being the case where Arcane Cloak would give me way too much lightning damage to overcome with the alternate quality cold damage from Archmage, that it would start not proccing Trinity correctly, and I had to swap into Call of the Brotherhood. So that's our damage setup. If you're mapping, just use greater multiple projectiles. I really only need slower proj, or I would only slock it in for boss fights like Cirrus, like Shaper, like Elder, boss fights where they have a lot of HP. Ultimately, while I was mapping T16 bosses, I would still hit those with the GMP, and I'd kill them just fine. It wasn't too big of a deal to just run that and only swap every now and then. So that's what you're going to do if you have a gem slot. If you have a 6-link, I would recommend Pinpoint, and if you have Pinpoint and a 6-link, I would recommend getting an Apex mode. This helps you generate intensity, so that way when you're going to single target bosses, you can generate those stacks of intensity, and Pinpoint ends up becoming a huge damage multiplier and really good support, while also being a support that feels good while clearing a map. Awesome support, love it, and I love Apex mode with it. So that's if you have a 6-link, but not necessary. Ultimately, I would just clear with GMP and swap for slower proj when having a tanky boss. So that clears up the damage gem links. Now let's look at the rest of our gem links. We're looking at a portal gem. We're looking at level 1 clarity, righteous fire, and flame dash. Now, Flame Dash, of course, is movement. Portal is just, I don't like picking up Portal Scrolls. Righteous Fire is a big damage multiplier. What people get for free pretty much in mana builds is Righteous Fire. Now, why is it for free? Why do I say it's for free? It's because Righteous Fire's degen it applies to you is based on your life pool. So what happens in mana builds is you scale up your mana pool really, really high, and you scale up the regen with it. While your Righteous Fire, the degen is based on your life pool. So if you don't scale a very high life pool, it's going to give you a very small amount of degen, and it's easily counteracted with Righteous Fire, with Agnostic, because you have so much sustain from your mana pool that the degen from Righteous Fire is not a big deal, and it gives you a big damage multiplier. Would recommend in mana builds. Clarity, we're only using this because we have a Watcher's Eye for mana recovery rate. I went with this because it was like 30C, it's really cheap. Alternate options would be damage taken from mana before life. This would make you more tankier. This makes you have more sustain. You could go for a 2-stat. You got options here. I was just trying to keep this cheap, and this was like really cheap. It was like 30C, not too bad at all. That's what I recommend. If you want to go a little bit more expensive, you can go for damage taken from mana before life. That'll make you more tanky. And if you want to go even more expensive, you can go for 2-stat Watcher's Eyes with both the mods, but those start to get pretty expensive. For our 5-link setup in our chest, we have Sigil of Power and Arcane Cloak, supported by Duration, Second Wind, and Arcane Surge. This means whenever we use our Arcane Cloak, which we can have about 100% uptime on it, it'll give us a very nice Arcane Surge that'll have a long duration, and by the time we hit the cooldown, we can pop it again, and it gives us almost 100% uptime on our Arcane Surge, along with very good uptime on our Arcane Cloak. And of course, Sigil of Power is for single target and a little bit of damage reduction on bosses. After that, for our next links, we have Hypothermia linked to Second Wind, linked to Bone Chill, linked to Vortex. This is important because we're trying to get 40% chill on monsters. Our Ball Lightning gets the chills of about 25% chills on enemies. With our setup here for Vortex, we can get all the way to 40% chills. How is that possible? It's through Elementalist. If we chill an enemy with a cold damage hit, the chill is going to be multiplied by 50%, and our base chill is 15%. So already there, we are looking at a 23% chill, not counting any ailment effect whatsoever. In our build, we have around 30-40% chill effect. So with our Ball Lightning, when we hit hardest with cold, we're getting something close to a 30% chill, I think. I think that math checks out. And then, if we chill the enemies with Vortex, we have supports like Bone Chill and Hypothermia, which give even more chill effect, which takes us all the way to a 40% chill. This means the enemies chilled by Vortex will be very slow, and they'll also take some additional cold damage from Bone Chill support. Awesome thing there, you can just have it on your left click. I was debating between using Arcane Cloak on my left click and Vortex. I ended up opting for Vortex, but it's kind of up to you if you'd rather have Arcane Cloak and then have Vortex on another key to just drop on bosses and whatnot when you get to them. After Vortex, we have an Arcanist brand setup with increased duration, Blade Blast, and Sniper's Mark. This is important because Sniper's Mark is a big DPS boost, and Blade Blast unnerves enemies, which makes them take 10% increased spell damage, so we'll just prop down those brands whenever a boss is spawning for more single target. I believe that covers the gem links. Now let's look at Flasks. Flask, we went for important things like bleed removal, enduring mana flask. This is just for some extra mana sustain, along with bleed, basically immunity, because we keep this up pretty much 100% of the time, so it feels good for bleeds. Then we have things like a Jade Flask with shock removal. I went for Jade because we're already stacking a lot of dodge. Evasion feels pretty good to mix into the build as well. And we also went for things like a Quartz Flask for additional phasing and dodge and for spell and attack dodge with curse immunity. After that, I went for a Roomies for the armor and the block. The block isn't great because it gets reduced by our acrobatics, but I like the extra defenses there. You can go for an offensive flask if you'd like, but I went for Roomies. I think it feels good for the extra tankiness. After that, we went for a Quicksilver of Adrenaline as always. So that covers the flasks, the gem links. Now let's get in and look at our actual passive tree. What are we doing here? Now normally with Archmage, you can go for basically Elemental Overload build style, or you can go for crit. I went for Elemental Overload because I think it's not that much less damage considering how much you spec into mana. You don't really spec that hard into crit unless you have a very high investment to get really good crit jewels basically. And I didn't want to go high investment. I wanted to keep it cheap, keep it simple. So that's why I went with Elemental Overload. The other thing about Elemental Overload is you get more passives to spend elsewhere, which made it basically, it made it feasible for us to go for things like acrobatics and phase acro and wind dance. We get spec a lot more defensively this way, so I think it feels pretty good. For the build, Besides just going Elemental Overload, you're picking up all the important mana nodes, Agnostic, Dynamo, Battle Rose. A lot of this stuff feels really good for mana. We're not picking up Mind Over Matter because we get that from Cloak of Defiance. That's why we're not grabbing it there. And then we're also picking up a Healthy Mind setup here to get really good mana. And we went for the AoE clusters here for the travel passes because they make our Ball Lightning hit more targets, basically. They hit more times because it takes longer for them to get out of range to keep hitting the enemy, so to speak. So that's what we went with here for our passives, and we basically are traveling all the way over to Wind Dancer, Acro, Phase Acro, and grabbing the good mana nodes along the way, along with Jewel Sockets and whatnot. I will say this, for this build, we went for a couple split personalities with life and mana. I'm not sure this is like the best approach. Maybe percent life, mana jewels with res on it would be better. It would make gearing a lot easier. I'm not sure this gives that much. I didn't test out other jewel setups, so these were like 5 to 10C when I bought them. If these things get bought out and get expensive, don't use them. The rare jewel, just a rare jewel with mana and life and like a res will do you just fine. I'm not sure these are even worth it. It's just what I was trying out because I figured, you know what, I'm going across halfway across the passive tree. I might as well screw around with some split personalities, what I told myself. After that, for cluster jewels. This jewel, I think I got pretty cheaply. I got for like an X or an X and a half or something, which was a 3 notable with Inspired Oppression and Corrosive Elements. This to me feels like I got this cheaper than I should have. I don't think you want to copy exactly this cluster unless it's like an X or something you can afford. Really what the important nodes we want to go for are Corrosive Elements and Inspired Oppression for the exposure on hit. This makes us get mana regen and subtracting res from Elementalists while we're mapping. So you really want the Corrosive Elements if you can get it, and you really want Inspired Oppression. Now, if these 2 jewel notables together on an 8 socket is too expensive, what I would recommend doing is grabbing a Hydrosphere in your setup instead of a Corrosive Elements, then just go for Inspired Oppression, and a good option might even be the non-critical strikes are lucky mod on a lightning jewel. Something like that could be even better damage-wise. So you got options there, in which case you just swap in a Hydrosphere. Now for the other mediums, this is something I pretty much want to use in almost every Elementalist I do, and that's Cold Conduction. Now why do I do Cold Conduction? It's so that way I can benefit from both shocks and chills while choosing Shaper of Winter. I'm gonna die on this hill. I'm going to tell everybody this whenever I see them. If you're choosing Shaper of Storms over Shaper of Winter, I'm disappointed in you and you've made a mistake. The reason for this is Shaper of Winter modifies the base chill to 15%, whereas this Shaper of Storms only gives you a base shock of 15%. What that means is also you get a 50% more multiplier on your chill, and you get a higher chill. So you can get up to 40% chill if you pick Shaper of Winter. Shaper of Storms does not increase your shock potential to 60% or anything. It doesn't give you that. And on top of that, if you use Cold Conduction, you're basically getting the shock, the base 15% shock for free, on top of the fact that you're getting a huge chill, which I think is so good defensively. I'm going to recommend this to pretty much anyone who plays Elementalist. Really, I'd recommend checking it out. I think it feels great. And then things like Inspired Oppression, again, gives us mana regenerate, ailment effect, elemental damage. Feels good. For our last cluster, I'm not sure this is the best approach. It was just a cheap cluster that gave us a nice amount of damage, which is Eye to Eye plus a repeater, so we get some cast speed as well as some more proj damage. I don't know if this is the best setup to go with. It's just something I wanted to try out. And we also went for a Veterans Awareness. Now, most people, when I've asked them about Veterans Awareness, a lot of people don't think it's worth, or they haven't tried it, or they just write it off instantly. I really think it's worth. When I've played with it, I always think it's high value. The reason being is, say I'm in a Ultimatum, and I'm getting hit by a bunch of enemies. My Arcane Cloak will wear off quicker, and I'll be more susceptible to damage. With Veterans Awareness, I start getting hit a bunch in Ultimatums. I am taking like half the damage in terms of Elemental because 10 max all res is huge, and my Arcane Cloak will last a lot longer. So that by the time they've hit me enough to wear off my Arcane Cloak, I would have already been dead in another scenario. The downside is the 2 seconds while you're on cooldown for your Arcane Cloak, you're 20% more, you take 20% more damage. So that's the downside. But from my experience playing with it, I feel a lot tankier when I'm using it than I'm not using it. So personally, I recommend it. Play with it yourself, see what you feel about it, but I really like Veterans Awareness when you're using a build that uses Arcane Cloak with Dynamo, where you already get a bunch of CDR on your guard skill, and it feels good in my opinion. After the cluster jewels, the other jewels I already talked about are the Watcher's Eye. Then we use a Pure Talent. Pure Talent gives us an important thing, which is 0.5% mana regen rate and 25 all attributes. That way we just spec all these mana nodes, we get the attributes from being connected to Scion Start, and we get the mana regen rate from being connected to Witch Starts. And for our last jewel socket, we have Healthy Mind, which just converts a lot of these early life nodes into mana, so that way we can stack a higher mana amount, get a better mana regen per second. It really just is a cozy, good feeling thing right all around. Now after the passive tree, we're of course going to look at the Ascendancy, which is Elementalist. Why did I choose Elementalist? For one, the Mastermind of Discord is a magnificent node that it gives us 1% base mana regen, which is huge, minus 25 res to enemies, which is huge for damage. Then we can go for Heart of Destruction, which gives AoE, which feels really good for Ball Lightning because it gets more hits. And then if we're not having the extra AoE, we have a big damage multiplier of Convergence, which is 30% more elemental damage. So awesome, first two nodes there. Then for our third node, we go for Shaper of Winter for big chills on enemies. It makes like maps that have turbo where bosses have like 50% attack speed or something. It makes them feel not so dangerous, and you really are feeling quite safe in a lot of mapping situations thanks to Shaper of Winter, not to mention the chill that comes along with it. Last but not least, of course, is Bastion of Elements here. Gives another layer of defenses against elemental damage, as well as Reflect immunity, so that way we can not care about Reflect as a map mod, and it makes it real nice when we're rolling maps, because that basically cuts it down to there being only one map mod that can stop us, which is no regen, which would prevent our mana regen from occurring. So that is the Ascendancy. Now after the Ascendancy, we're going to talk briefly about Pantheons. Pantheons, we went with Brine King. We didn't get stunned too much in this build because of the layered defenses of Wind Dancer, a bunch of dodge, evade, just killing monsters fast. For the most part, I didn't notice getting stunned much, but I still like Brine King in the scenario that you get jumped by a bunch of monsters. It is very dangerous to get stun locked, so I just decided to opt for Brine King because we don't go for something like the Skyforce boots, which would basically make us stun immune. Since we're going for Omiekans for the dodge, we really want some stun resistance, and I think Brine King's a great solution. After that, I went with Soul of Gurkin for the extra evade chance, and for the movement speed if you haven't been hit recently, but I never ended up capturing this because I don't have a dig map, so that would have been just some extra clear speed there. Alternative choice, as always, I recommend Relic Cache is a great choice to not die to bleeds. So those are your options there. After Pantheons for Bandit, we killed all of them because we just wanted the 2 passive points as the best option for us. Now briefly, I want to talk about leveling, which I don't normally do in these videos. I often forget about it. For this build, it was pretty much just grabbing, your choice of the first spell you get, which is like Purifying Flame, Freezing Pulse, Lightning Tendrils, whatever the level 1 spell is. Grab one of those, take that to level 12, at which point you can equip Ball Lightning, I believe is a level 12 spell, and then you'll be able to use Ball Lightning all the way up until level 31, at which point you'll get your good supports like Slower Proj, like Archmage, and you can really just cruise through the entire game from that point onward. And it's always a good idea to get your uniques like Dream Fragments, like Aziri's Foible, like Call of the Brotherhood, like Dance of the Offered. A lot of these uniques are kind of low-level requirements, so you can get them pretty early on, and it'll just help you crush through the game as you go. And for the weapon slot, I'd recommend the Darkseer Scepters. There's these scepters that you can get flat mana, flat life on per level, a little bit of damage, some blind on hit. Those are some great scepters to level with until you can equip a Pledge of Hands. So that would deal with the early leveling experience and it'll make it pretty smooth, I would say. And that's what I'd recommend for you guys. Hopefully I've summed up the character pretty well. I've defined it for you guys. I will be leaving a PUB in the description with leveling trees for 10, 20, 30, so forth, all the way up to level 93, along with recommendations or advice or information I forgot to mention here in the video. As always, I thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace out, guys. Have a good one.